So sorry to do that.
Okay. Do I have to go back and start over again, Jericho?
No, just start from the names.
Okay, so members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Sue Mittenden.
I'm here.
Athlon Sweeney. Oh, you're muted. Athlon? Oh, she's, all right. Tara Rusteri.
I'm here.
Veronica Bolchik.
Here.
And Athlon? Uh-oh, the mute button's escaping her. Well,
Athlon, you can do Open Apple A or Control A. Sorry, Alt A. If you can't find the mute button.
Finally here.
There we go.
Yay, she's here. Hooray. Okay.
Sorry,
And-
I just got my computer back from Computer Solutions. It had viruses, so I was all kinds of messed up.
Oh, okay, well, whew, that's terrible. All right, staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jericho Mealy
In attendance?
and Ann Medina.
Here.
Okay, we do not have any anticipated speakers on the agenda, but I do want to welcome Holly McGowan, a member of the public. Good evening. This open meeting of the Council for Human Services is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Council for Human Services is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other people may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along by the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. After members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Okay. So the first item on the agenda is we've established a quorum. So motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you from Tara. All those in favor by roll call. Veronica?
Aye.
Sue? Tara?
Aye.
Athlon?
Aye.
And Ruthie, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm gonna make one small change to the agenda, which I failed to put, which is to welcome Veronica and Tara to our first meeting. I'd love for each of you to just take a moment and tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to apply for and be appointed to this group. And I'll start with Veronica.
Hi, I'm Veronica Bolchik. I've been a year-round resident. We just had our 4th anniversary, but a owner on island for a number of years and a visitor for even longer than that. Basically retired, but spent a lot of time volunteering in different opportunities. Jericho and the vaccination clinic, the food pantry, the bookmobile, basically looking to see where I can help out with my time. In my previous life, serviced a number of boards and opportunities in human services my entire life, being a former teacher of special needs and also working in the business world for 25 years. So, you know, I was raised to believe in giving back. And that's why I'm here, to use my skills to benefit the whole community. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks. Tara?
So I have basically now give 100% of my time to civic and volunteer services. I'm an EMT, but by volunteer. So that helps so I can make my own schedule. I've been on the Town Board of Human Services in Greenwich, Connecticut for a number of years, on the Affordable Housing Trust in Connecticut, as well as I deal a lot with state level housing bills and advocacy. I, like Veronica, believe that we really need to have the ability to give back if we have that opportunity. And my background is mostly in oncology, drug development, and cancer research. And then I did spend a very short period of time on Wall Street. Thank God that was a short period of time. And then I became a chemistry teacher. I stopped working a few years ago based upon my husband's work schedule, and we have 6 children between us. They now 3 are out of college, 2 left in college, and our last is a senior in high school. So I'm about to be an empty nester. I spend more than half of my year on island and am really committed to giving back. And I really do think and hope that my experience that I have can really help.
Thanks. I'm going to ask the sitting members also to just introduce themselves. I'll start with you, Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue Mintonen. I currently work for NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I also work for the Unitarian Church on Island. I co-founded the Warming Place, which is a winter place for the unsheltered to come in out of the cold. And I serve on the Cape Cod and Islands Commission on the Status of Women. And this is I'm finishing up my first year on this council.
Thanks. Athlon?
Hi, Tara and Veronica. I'm Athlon Sweeney. I'm a private therapist on Island and have a history of working with both Nantucket AIDS Network and Fairwinds for many years. I'm a mother of 2 and a mother of 2 French bulldogs.
And Ruthie?
Hi, I'm Ruthie. I am an EMT at the hospital. I have a husband who keeps me very busy. And it's like I have 3 kids, but it's just one husband. And I'm here because I love to help out. I love to join, help out with the community, meet new people. I'm a very people person, and I just love people. It's just something I love to do. So I keep myself busy and volunteering at work and also at home.
Thanks, Ruthie. And Tara, it's so interesting listening to your background. I actually lived in Old Greenwich for a few years, and I am on the Affordable Housing Trust here and have been on the Council for Human Services. So, and I share the commitment. I am a full-time volunteer.
Yeah.
In the community and share that value. And I think that's something we all share together, which is why we've chosen this board to serve on. And I just want to welcome you both. And I look forward to hearing, from your experience and it'll be really interesting to hear what the Human Services group is doing in another community.
Yeah.
I think that you're going to lend a lot of insight for us. So thank you. Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the December 20th and January 24th meetings. Jericho, point of order, if we don't have a quorum of people who were at, oh no, wait, 4 is a quorum for those meetings. So we're fine.
Yep.
With Okay, because we were a committee of 7 at the time. So, okay. So I would enter, if there's no comments, I would entertain a motion to approve both those sets of minutes from someone who was present at those meetings.
I can make that motion.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, so I'm going to take a roll call vote of those who were there. So that would be Sue,
Aye.
Ruthie,
Aye.
Athlon,
Aye.
and myself, I. Okay. So the next thing on our agenda, which we've had to delay a couple of times. So for background for Veronica and Tara, we did some sort of thinking as a group as to what things we wanted to accomplish. And one of the topics that came up was the impact of the community of the printing of the court docket information by the media, the publication of that information by the media. And this was an idea I think that Athlon proposed initially and the group supported following up on. And our notion was to invite members of the media to come to a meeting to have a conversation around that practice and what it means to the community and what the impact is, and their reasons for doing it, potential reasons why it may not be a good idea, which is some of the thought process that came from this board. So the idea was to use tonight's meeting as a planning session with the rough idea of then inviting the members of the media to come to the meeting in the next meeting in May for a roundtable discussion, basically of this, and hopefully we can all learn from each other and just no particular outcome planned, but to have that kind of roundtable discussion. So the breakdown of the points of discussion for tonight are to establish a format for that meeting, like how is the meeting going to get run, and potentially develop a list of topics or questions to be asked around or specifics to be discussed around this topic. And then also to come up with a comprehensive list of stakeholders who we would want to invite to that conversation with as much notice as possible so that they can plan ahead in their schedules. So I would open the floor to thoughts from the board on that first one, which is what is the structure of this conversation and what does it look like? Any thoughts on how that might take place? Athlon?
So my thoughts is basically, I think we need to open by hearing them talk about what the importance is. Anything that's come up over the years that has questioned it and what they have determined are the reasons that they would continue past those concerns that were brought up. I know that I've heard concerns from the community, so I can't imagine at times either an individual hasn't been approached to discuss it or in a forum like this. So I'm interested in what has happened, a little bit of the history, a little bit of why it continues. And also, as media has moved to being more online, it's been adopted there. So this has been something that has not only stayed in the paper, but has been adopted by online sources. I really just want to hear from them a little bit about the life of this whole process to start.
I think,
Veronica?
to hear perspectives from the different stakeholders. And my question is, is this done out of practice? Is it done in other communities? And the other thing is from the court system or the sheriff or police department, will they also be participating in this? Because I think their you know, they've got a perspective, and I really would like to hear before making recommendations. You know,
I think we could also explore other, as you said, Veronica, a little bit about other models. I mean, there are other towns that do report some of the information, but in many cases that I certainly am aware of, that individuals' names are withheld. And, you know, I think unless there is a particular situation of such that is sexual assault, or that it does not, an individual's name does not need to be part of the public record. So I think we should explore kind of the whys and ifs. I would definitely say that we should have someone from NPD as part of that conversation, but we should also be prepared to show examples of other communities and how they do it. If this is still a practice that, you know, people want, or, you know, that they want, that they feel it's important, that, you know, we have a way to shield folks. I mean, you know, people like to see a police blotter, but you don't always have to see personal information.
aggregate information is one
Yeah.
thing, but and I guess now, you know, we're getting more into the nitty gritty of it, but you know, public shaming is another issue.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So for Veronica and Tara, I like to call on people to speak rather than have an open dialogue in the meeting. So just as a format of how we do things. So just,
Thank you.
yep.
thank you.
Yep. And so Jericho, before I call on you, are there any other board members who want to comment on this sort of? Yep, Athlon.
I think an important point for us to consider is not only other communities, but other communities of our size and other like communities, because I think if you're talking about a community that has, you know, hundreds of thousands of people in it, then names and specific information, it's not so identifiable. However, in our community, it's extremely identifiable. So I think that's something for us to consider about how much of a petri dish we are.
Mm-hmm. Sue or Ruthie, before I call on Jericho? Jericho?
Yeah, so I just wanted to poke in and say that I am in the process of a literature review on this subject. I'm going to have a lot of stuff for you guys to read on this particular topic. I'm having some trouble getting kind of straightforward statistical data on this. Like, I don't have yet to find a particularly good study or a particular study or a particularly good paper with just a very clear-cut before and after, and then statistical complications. Most of what I've found so far has been normative. So it's been, this is bad, we shouldn't do this, as opposed to in this situation. But there's quite a bit of discussion about this. I'll try and have a packet for you guys well ahead of next meeting, just so you guys have it to hand and that we can bring it up if necessary during the discussion. But I do think, as you said, having the people currently publishing this information, probably a great way to start is for them to lay out the case for why this is good, what public good does this serve, and then to sort of let them dig their own hole from there, because I don't think anyone who does it has thought about that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, Sue?
Jericho, I love the idea of getting a little research packet on this. That's very helpful. Will that be made public so that the guests we invite will also have access?
Absolutely. What my guess is that I'm going to get you guys probably a brief bibliography of too many papers for any of us to read, and then a short highlight reel, and then I will either make a presentation, not a presentation, but make an abstract of that so that everybody's on the same page. I do not think it would be fair for us to not give that information well ahead of time. So just that does seem the best way to do it.
So in terms of structure, how I imagine this is that tonight we would almost come up with with a preliminary list of, as we're doing, of questions we want to ask, and we would give those to the people who are being invited to participate in advance. So that, I mean, this is not, in my mind, this is not intended to be a gotcha moment. It's meant to be a healthy community conversation. I think that's what this board is committed to doing on a number of topics since we've been meeting over the last couple of years. So, Athlon?
Brooke, how do you want to handle, or maybe the whole committee, how do we want to handle situations where we come up with questions inevitably as discussion happens and answers from the parties involved come forth? It's going to naturally, organically spawn other questions. So how do we want to handle those?
So I have no problem with an evolving conversation, but I do think it's helpful to give participants a heads up in the direction we're going, both perhaps to be reassuring that we're not looking to, our purpose isn't to call them out on this. It's to have a just a robust dialogue about it, because this board has expressed concerns about the impact, and we really want to understand better. And so having it evolve and have it be a moderated sort of moving conversation. I have to say that for those of you who don't know, I am standing for election to select board. And if I am elected, I will no longer be able to sit on this board. So I will not be here to chair this discussion. So Jericho and I had a conversation about his being the moderator of this as the Director of Human Services. So it doesn't fall to a brand new chair. And so because actually there will have to be an election to replace me if I'm no longer able to serve. So so that's sort of a weird thing that's going to happen in the midst of all of this. I had hoped that this would be the date of this conversation with the public, and then when our meeting got postponed from last month, it slid down the calendar. So does that answer your question, Athlon, in terms of it not being like it's just these questions?
Yes, but I wonder what it would look like, and it might be too chaotic to do this, but I wonder what it would look like as they're answering questions if we submitted written questions to you and you sort of vetted them and decided like what made sense to ask.
So sort of through the chat,
Yeah.
or something
like that. Like you can, just because I think any of us could sort of come out. I just want to make sure that we've got sort of a source to look at it, give it an eyeball a second time to be like, yeah, that's a good question. Let's get that out there.
Yeah. Tara?
You could source the chat so that only the moderator sees the questions that come in, so that if there's not repetitive, or that if somebody has a heated, says something inappropriate, that it's just not addressed. So I would suggest that we actually have Jericho, have the chat only go to Jericho and potentially maybe one other person, so that there's a backup there. But that way you could vet the questions. And then you can also say, we have a limited amount of time for questions, but you can record the chat and you can say, we'll answer any additional questions that we didn't have time to address, in writing, so then that way we can craft a response.
Mm-hmm.
I think, apologies. I do think we should have a kind of outline of our core questions ahead of time, so that that everyone has a chance to have the same preparation beforehand. I'm making this seem like more of a debate than I think it really wants to be, but this is the kind of thing that at least several of the people who are going to be on the publishing side of things get very touchy on this, and that in the past this discussion has come up and gotten extremely heated, so they're sort of anticipating a jump on you guys.
Right.
They're anticipating getting jumped on by you guys, because I speak English.
Right. And I think these topics are sensitive. for everyone. This is the reason it came up is that it's a sensitive topic for people whose names are printed. Athlon as a therapist sees the impact. I've heard also from other clinicians at Fairwinds that this is a challenge. I mean, this presents an additional challenge to people who are struggling for some people. And so these are the things that I want, that I'm hoping will surface and be presented to the media who are choosing to publish the details that they're choosing to publish, and help them understand the consequences of that for individuals and frankly for the community potentially for the community as a whole. I did have a conversation with Kevin Marshall of the police department, who suggested that we reach out to the public information officer, and I can't remember his name, and invite. But he did tell me that the police department does not generally release a lot of information from their end of things unless there is misinformation presented in the media that they feel they need to make a public statement to correct, or if it's a significant crime that is just getting a lot of media attention that they need to weigh in on. But as a general rule, they do not put forth a lot of details from their database on arrests. And most of this, what's coming out is actually coming out of the court docket, not from the police department. But I absolutely would love for them to be present. I don't know whether they, again, it's all, this is a touchy subject for all the parties involved, and can be. So, Athlon?
I think that's why it would be nice to do the vetting of the questions and let them know ahead of time that is going to be happening.
Mhm.
And that we're sensitive to it. I think we should let them know we're sensitive to it. Though we have questions, though we have feelings about it, we are sensitive to this being their job and this being something that it's been longstanding. So it's not an attack. It is a question about what's right for the community.
Mhm. And it is public information. It's publicly available. If any one of us wanted to know, we could go get this information as well. So, but I want to understand. I mean, I think the most interesting thing to me is that when the current started initially, there was a stated policy that they weren't going to use people's names, that they were going to aggregate statistics around types of crime and take an anonymous, increase the level of anonymity in their reporting. And then their practice changed. And I'm very curious about, there was an editorial decision that changed because there was a stated practice and policy. And I'm curious what led to that change. I want to ask that question, because clearly there was a reason for that. So that's certainly one question that I would want to ask. Veronica?
Now, one of the other places, I gues, that I would want to start with is the legality, and from both ends, that, does it state somewhere in some statute or whatever that this has to be published? And then also the legality of persons' private rights, so I don't know if the police department can answer that, or do we need to have maybe a attorney or someone who would have that level be part of the conversation also?
That's a really interesting point. Jericho?
Just in reference to that point, there is a legal obligation for the information to be made public, but there is no requirement for it to be published. Past that, I think this is relatively settled legal matters from my initial pass by. There's no legal mechanism to enforce or unenforce it. It would have to be a conscience or social good argument, as far as I know.
Okay. Sue?
I think my question that I'd like to ask is, do they publish everything that's on the court docket, or do they pick and choose? And what criteria they use to decide what goes in the paper and what doesn't? Because
That is a
I've
good
seen,
one.
I've seen bits in the past where people affiliated with reporters or other media people, their kids don't end up in the columns. And isn't that interesting?
Well, and there's also a more expansive write-up on certain things as well than others. And the philosophy behind those editorial decisions would be the way I would describe it. Is an interesting question. Any other topics around? Jericho, are you grabbing all of this to be able to?
Anne should be taking the notes down.
Okay, great. So in terms of process and timing, I would hope that we would be able to pull this sort of list of preliminary questions together, along with maybe some of the documentation or the research links to the research that you found, Jericho. And I would say a link to the recording of this meeting, because I think I would certainly invite those who are invited to participate to hear what we're talking about and because I think this is a reflection of our intention in holding this meeting, and hopefully that will inspire or help them feel more comfortable to be present. And, I think that what I love about this board is that we're not afraid to have conversations about uncomfortable topics, and that we shouldn't shy away from the ones that are uncomfortable, for the benefit of the larger community and the health of the community overall. So any other, Athlon?
Do we have any mechanism for collecting questions from the greater community so that we can ask them? I know people can join in, but say they can't. Is there a way to collect? There might be things we don't even think of.
So that is a good question. I mean, Jericho, can we ask the public outreach for the town to post that this is going to happen on social media and provide an email address to submit questions?
We can do a couple of things on that front. We can have Florencia post it in a couple of different medium to ask for comments and just collect the comments from there. We can also throw together a Google form that we can then publish if people are more concerned about publicly expressing their views on this particular point. So there's a couple of things we can do there. The only concern I would have about that is that it might not get in front of enough people quickly enough to get a representative sample of questions, but there should be no trouble with setting that several ways of collecting community information on this point.
Okay. Well, and this could be prove to be the first of more than one conversation as well, if the community is interested in pursuing this further. So that's great, but I think we have to move pretty rapidly because a month passes, as we all learn, in the blink of an eye. Athlon?
I'm just curious, are we creating our own questions now in this meeting?
Yeah, I think we should. I mean, we've talked sort of in general, but I would say from where we've started, from this sort of free-floating conversation, do we want to nail down 3 or 4 specific questions that we would send out with the invitations?
I have a difficult question for them, and I don't know, they might not answer honestly, but I still would like to ask the question. I know they're hired by media, but I want to know what their personal views are on having to do it, having to publish it.
Might be a
Hmm.
better way to ask that is, what if
That would be good.
a you or someone else that was close to you was in this situation? Would you have concerns about publishing it then?
Hmm.
Because I don't think you're going to get. I think that your personal views on this are that it's my job. With no skin in the game, I feel like, I do think that it would be the ideal output of this particular meeting would be a relatively 10, 15 questions we can put together. Then we can email them around to any members who aren't here. We can get sort of a group approval on that. And as long as we do that all in an open email chain, that should be fine. That would not, I don't believe that would be, I got to double check with Maureen Coleman what level of feedback we can do in terms of open meeting law violation. But there's some ability for us to at least cull the questions from this meeting outside of a posted meeting. And then we can, work from there. I just think we can't have any discussions and we can't have any decision-making by the board members, but that a staff member can do something with the information once it's all collected, something like that.
So
think-
I'm feeling more like we should just agree on 5 questions as a board tonight for preliminary questions and just settle that this evening. That would be my inclination.
Yeah.
Veronica?
As with any topic or subject, I don't know how to phrase the questions, but I think for all the stakeholders, we want to ultimately get the pros and the cons. So how do you phrase that into a question that, and that would, Athlon would, somewhat get to your point that, what are the pros of having this information published and what are the cons of having it published? And how do we put that into a question? Because that's ultimately what we want. So we have information then to move forward. So I don't have the questions in my head, but that's ultimately what I think we have to do.
That's the goal, is to weigh the pros and cons. Sue?
Yeah, I think the other thing that's in my head is, so sometimes you see what people are going to court for. So they've not been convicted of anything or found guilty of anything. And I kind of want to put the question out there, would it be better to wait until someone's been adjudicated and only print a name, is that a compromise position that people feel comfortable with? Or because anybody can be accused of anything, and
Right.
we've seen a lot of mess happen in the court systems,
Right.
as you go through. So yeah, I'd love to know if that serves the public purpose that the media is trying to accomplish with what they're doing.
So I want to go to the next topic, which is, who do we want at the table for this conversation? And then we can circle back to the questions, because the questions are going to be from the point of view of the sort of this pros and cons idea. The questions are going to be answered differently depending on the perspective of the different stakeholders, right? So let's come up with a list of who we'd like to invite. And that will help me formulate an idea about how to phrase the questions so that they could be answered by anyone who's a stakeholder in this conversation, right? So thoughts on, we've talked about the police department. When we talk about the media, the ones that I know are publishing are The Current and the Inky Mirror.
Daybreak.
Is Daybreak publishing this kind of
I
information?
don't know if they are, but they might. I don't know. I feel like they might link to it.
Well, certainly as if they're choosing not to, that's an interesting perspective too, right? So Daybreak. Anybody else on the media side of things that anyone can think of?
What about pardon again for poking in, the radio station, et cetera, is owned by, is part of the same organization as one of the other media groups, right?
They own Daybreak.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we would probably go to, oh my gosh, I'm having a name.
No, it's Laura.
Laura.
It's Laura. Something.
Laura. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, they may or may not feel they have an interest in this conversation. I don't know, but I certainly would invite.
Possibly Nantucket TV.
Oh, yeah. Good idea, Ruthie. Yep. Okay. And then we've heard concern from mental health providers. So on that front, the thoughts that are a safe place. Fair winds. Athlon, is there a network of private providers or a way to reach them as a group?
There historically there were a few providers who were all linked. I don't know if that's consistent now. Sue, you're nodding.
The Behavioral Health Advisory Group.
Yeah.
There you go.
Behavioral health. I don't know necessarily how connected they are to all the private is
Right.
what she was asking. So, but I do think that they should be invited, and I think NAMI should be invited.
Yep.
And in some ways, I think Samaritans.
Tell me about Samaritans.
Well, there's Samaritans of Cape Cod and the islands, but they're a high risk hotline for people who are suicidal. And I think because what we're talking about feeds into the compilation for things that can increase suicidality, I think that they would be appropriate to have on.
Okay.
Because they could speak to that.
Great. Sue?
Yeah, if the Behavioral Health Advisory Group doesn't have everyone connected, I know Fairwinds has been collecting private practitioner data for their new training institute. So we can just make sure.
And how about
Tell
somebody
people
from the
this way.
hospital?
Yeah.
Yep. Social services. Sarah Tchaikovsky. Yep, that's a great idea.
Interfaith
Veronica?
Council.
The school system does not get involved because I don't think anyone under 18 would ever be published because of age. But you do have students over 18 in school that could. Yeah.
Athlon?
Well, commenting on that, what we have is a trickle down effect of parents who get published and the kids,
Oh, yeah.
other kids who are 15, 16, 17 find out about it, and they might catch flack in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think one of the school counselors
Yeah.
who are in the know would be great to have on.
Yeah.
Great. Well, that's a pretty comprehensive list.
Yeah.
Any others?
I don't know if you caught it, but I said the Interfaith Council.
Oh, right. Yeah, I did. I wrote it down.
Okay.
Yep, I think, yep.
You know,
Veronica?
and actually I would direct this toward Athlon. Would we want to ask an individual who has experienced this? And, it would have to be definitely vetted or just, but would we want someone that has had personal experience to share it?
Sure, I think that that would be really helpful. I think it's finding the person who is healed enough to speak to it.
Yeah,
It's possible, but I think we have to vet it and see if there's somebody who is in a place where they can be an advocate for others.
right.
So perhaps when we reach out to the human service agencies that we're inviting, that we could add in the invitation that are, if there are any community members who you feel would feel comfortable telling their story or having you anonymize and tell a story, that we run into this in housing, that people don't want to come out and say they have housing issues in the public space, but they're willing to have their story told on a more anonymous
Right.
level. Yeah, Tara?
You could add that as part of the community outreach. If we do a survey or a question that, do you have an experience that you'd be willing to share? Something to that effect.
Yeah. Sue and then Athlon.
I want to add to the list of providers, the Immigration Resource Center.
Great. Okay. And Athlon.
Along with what Tara said, I think even getting away from the story in particular, because I think here it's so easy to identify, especially if it's been in the paper already. And so if somebody doesn't want to rehash that, kind of like a question for people like, how did this impact you? So there's impact statements. So more impact statements versus what the story was. So that
Right.
it's not identifiable.
Yeah, that's great. Excellent. Okay, we feel good about our list. And I would say this doesn't have to be a closed list. If somebody has a thought of someone we've left out, they can email staff, Jericho. And I mean, this is not something we have to finalize. It's just at least these, if not, and anything else that Jericho could think of or in the next week or so. So I want to then circle back to try to finalize some preliminary questions with an understanding that it's not a closed list of questions, but what are the most important questions that we would like to hear? What's the information? All right, let me try to rephrase this. How do we form some questions that will get to what we're hoping to learn from this conversation, right? And these are questions that could be answered either by the media, the police, or providers, or individual community participants. And I mean, we started with, would they like to share, would we want to give the members of the media an opportunity to, I don't know, it feels like if we start with explain to us why you do this, that's not a great place to start. Sue, help me
Maybe
here.
tell us what the public good, what is the benefit to the public? Really, what is it? Like, tell us how you're serving the community. How does this?
And are we setting up we think this is bad in that question?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Well, so maybe we
Maybe
start
the
with other
specific-
questions.
What
It's about
benefits do you
impact.
see? I don't know.
I mean, I think a very basic question is, how have they come to the place where they think that publishing this is a needed public service?
Close the door, please.
Like,
Actually,
I mean, it's a general question. Why has this survived through time?
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's a very neutral way to put it too. Like,
Yeah.
how could you explain to us the history of the
History.
like the history of the publishing of this particular part of your newspaper? How long has it been in your paper? How many names, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the criteria piece that Sue mentioned.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's excellent.
The history of the practice and the question of, do you print the entire docket, or if it's not the entire docket, how do you select?
The other question that I'm curious about is, have they ever batted around the idea of doing it differently?
Hmm.
And what have been their ideas?
That's
And
excellent.
that gets to my question about the current too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, have
So
they
I-
investigated what other communities do? Do
Yeah.
they-
So have they ever considered other ways of informing the community about crime?
And if so, what have those ideas been? Like, what have they brainstormed?
Okay. Okay, and then I think that then there's like there could be a series of questions for providers on the community impact too.
Yeah.
So in your experience, how help me some, yeah.
Well, I think it's the impact on the other side, right, that you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, being that I've been sitting across from people who've described that, can some of our human service providers describe the impact that they witness from people who are either I'm not going to be able to say the word peripherally impacted.
Peripherally.
Thank you for the help, Tara. Impacted by something that's been in the paper, like that trickle down effect of children, and
Mhm.
also what's been the impact for people who have to outreach for services and tell their story about what the impact has been on them.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think we ask it as an open-ended question. I mean, Athlon, you've had experience, and so you know this became an issue for you because you've seen the specifics, but keeping it as a more open-ended question so that the kids may come up, or and I think certainly for the schools, that's why we're inviting them, right? Veronica, were you gonna?
Yeah, I think the impact question, though, should really be posed to everybody. Because from the police department, what do they think
I was
the
gonna-
impact is?
Yeah.
Mhm.
The court system, what is the impact, whatever. So it's not just from the I'm calling it the recipient, but I'm not thinking of the other term. But from all angles, what is the impact?
Mhm.
Right, because
Yeah.
maybe the police will tell us they get tips when people see a name, like, I don't know, there's,
Yeah.
it could be a good information getter.
Mm.
Athlon.
My question is for Jericho, actually. Jericho, I wonder if there is any bit of psychoeducation you could do on community trauma.
I mean, that's definitely something we can put into the human services plan. I don't believe that I am competent to do any of that myself.
Even just getting the definition out there and having us think as a group about how does this impact the potential community trauma that people experience?
Right.
Just food for thought.
Yeah, no, we can definitely, I mean, I think we can. So a fair amount of our outreach bottleneck should be resolved as we add some staff on the public information side, which means that we can be doing a kind of ongoing social media campaign along these lines that is not going to fall to that is going to be part of someone's job description as opposed to an add-on. So we can absolutely start doing consistent messaging on those things. If this meeting gets traction, then we can then kind of turn it into more of a kind of ongoing series about social issues on the island. And this, I don't want to get it too far ahead of myself, but I'm thinking that, yeah, that is something we can definitely do. I would not be comfortable doing that anytime soon until I'm more up on this particular topic personally, but that is absolutely something we could be doing.
Yeah, and I imagine there will be a follow-up conversation at the meeting after this, like where does this group take the information gleaned from this conversation in terms of our role in helping town administration and the select board set policy on human services, and guide the conversation around human services. I mean, that's our job as a board. And so, I mean, this feels like an information gathering session that then might lead to recommendations, requests of the media, or action in some way that might take place at a future meeting as opposed to at that meeting. So it's another meeting where the information would be digested and this board would determine what here's an example for Tara and Veronica of something this board did. We were concerned in COVID about communication of critical COVID information in other languages.
Mhm.
And while we have no authority on that topic, what we did is we took input from this board and made a request of town administration to accelerate the timeline for communication on COVID related issues in Spanish and Portuguese in the community. And they responded. They moved faster. They hired translators. They got COVID announcements out in a much more timely manner than they had been doing. And so that's the kind of thing, the impact that this board can have on policy and practice in our government. So, yeah. So, and I as chair have seen, that role of being sort of a conduit of information from the community through to town for policy purposes. And hopefully I'm hoping that's what will come out of this conversation as well. Athlon?
As you're talking, I'm just going sidebar a little bit, but historically, our police department, EMTs, fire, did not do CIT trainings, which is a week-long training for anybody coming in to learn about mental health conditions, substance abuse. It occurs to me that how lovely would it be if our media got some of that kind of annual training, just to understand it.
Yeah.
It's just a thought as
Yeah.
far as would they be open to something like that? Maybe not a whole week because they're not doing mental health and substance abuse all the time. But what we know is that kind of information is something that they work on. So maybe a day a year.
And perhaps guiding them to the resources as well for that. So yeah, I mean, I'm super excited that this is finally going to happen. And so how do we feel? Jericho, do you feel like you have enough guidance in terms of putting together an outreach list, an invitation list? The questions I have written down are, what is the history of this practice? Do they publish the entire docket, or are they making editorial selections, and based on what criteria? Have they ever considered other ways of informing the community, sharing this information with the community? And if so, what other ideas or methods have they considered? And then and also asking everyone present, what has your experience been of the impact of the publication of these details on individuals or the community as a whole? And is there anything important that we've missed in that summary of questions as a starting point? So
I think that sounds like a good foundation. I think questions will come up based on what people say, but I feel like we're here to understand.
Yeah.
We just want to know. So teach us.
yeah. And then circling back to the first bullet point, which is a format for the meeting, the way I'm thinking about this is it's a facilitated conversation, facilitated by Jericho, with the opportunity for participants to enter follow-up questions in the chat and have Jericho filter those questions for redundancy and appropriateness as to the tone and direction of the conversation. Does that make sense? To keep the tone as focused more on informational rather than debate or accusatory tone. And with an eye toward identifying what the problems are and recommendations for solving them. Yeah, Athlon?
Just me, but accusatory, no. Debate potential. Like, I think debate's okay.
Okay.
I think accusatory, not.
Right.
But debate and wondering is healthy.
So I'm
Agreed.
kind of, I am perfectly comfortable moderating. I don't think that's going to be any particular concern for any of the parties involved. And I do think the idea of us getting the 5 questions together in a way to present to our list is definitely a good idea. My curiosity at this point right now is, are we intending to have them join us for this discussion at the next meeting? Because I think 1 month turnaround might be a little short on this. What I would propose is that at the next meeting, this is a bullet point where you will get an update from me. You will have all of the information in front of you that we're going to send out before, by that meeting. And then the actual roundtable would be in June, unless we believe the summer is going to make this an issue in terms of responses. I am skeptical that we're going to pull everybody together on the same page by the end of May is my only concern here.
Athlon?
Jericho, when you say responses, do you mean the people we're inviting to attend?
So I'm sorry, I didn't, response may have been an incorrect word. I'm just thinking that everybody, so if we intend to do this on the May meeting, then it would be me putting the packet together for you guys. Then it would be us getting the list together and the questions together to the people involved. And then them reading through it, deciding whether they want to come or not, getting all that together. And I am somewhat skeptical that I believe we will have a better response if we do not do this in 1 month. I don't know if that will be, if that means May is a better month, or I don't know if this is something we've tabled for long enough that we want to get into it as quickly as we can. But I do, my logistical concern at the moment is that I think that people are going to be like, another month and we're going to go through all this. I don't think I'm going to get, like, I'm not going to do it. So why would I bother? Right? Not enough time. So why would I bother?
The other piece is that if we are looking for input from the community, that a little more time for people to respond to public outreach and notice that this is coming up might actually grow the audience of people who would attend, and we would get more public input and participation if it were delayed till June. Thoughts, Sue, and then Veronica.
My concern is that when you hit the end of June, is anybody going anywhere for a meet? I mean, like, yeah, are we gonna get anybody's attention?
Yeah, I
It's
know.
summer, it's beautiful, it's, sidewalk dining, it's,
What would the date be in June?
Whenever. I mean, we can pick it as long as we agree upon it ahead of time. We're not stuck to a Tuesday or a Monday evening, and we're not stuck to
Right.
the same day each month. We can be nimble on that front. Like
If
the
we-
other, oh, sorry, please go.
If we can do it before the end of school, I think we should be okay.
So perhaps this board meets at our, what has been our standard schedule, well, most recently, the fourth Tuesday. And then maybe a week or two after that. So it's a total of 6 weeks instead of a full 2 months before. So maybe the first week in June.
Or even the second week.
Yeah.
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 Because Jericho, I can hear that you have a lot on your plate.
It's not, I mean, I think I can get the work done in time without it being a particularly challenging thing. I just genuinely think the response, both in terms of data that we collect, the participation we get from people in the community, all of that is going to, like, the two paths I see is we do this as close to before the end of school as possible, or that we run this as a community data collection effort, and we really go longer on the community outreach, and we try and get kind of maybe not comprehensive, but to get a fairly large sample of information from different people. Maybe we run it over the summer, and then we do this when things start to calm down in the fall. I don't know. I don't have a strong intuition either way which one is going to work better. But I feel like this time of year, the people that are going to have the most to say about this are going to be just completely hustling as hard as they can for the next 4 months, for the next like 3 to 4 weeks. I don't know that doing it in June is going to give them any more free time, mind you.
So I have a thought on this, and that is that sometimes with recorded meetings, they are watched later because they're posted. And so that this could be the first, my gut tells me June, a little more time for participants to get it on their calendar. And then post the recorded meeting and ask for further input for the community, because that would inform this group as to whether there is more conversation to be had on the topic. Is there interest in the community to follow up with more data collection and gathering on the topic? And that could be a follow-up project of soliciting more input. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we would have to, obviously, fundamentally, the meeting date will depend on the availability of a Zoom meeting. So that's a town administration question. We could look at calendars to see how everybody's schedule looks in June. The third week of the month is the hardest to get meetings from getting access to the Zoom platform. Doing it on Zoom rather than in person probably increases the likelihood of participation, I would think. The first Tuesday is the 7th, the second Tuesday is the 14th. Ethelyn, when does school end?
Not till the third week, I think. Well, it ends for seniors earlier, but then it doesn't end till, I believe, till the third week.
If we wait until the 14th, are we into like year-end wrapping up stuff?
Well, you're into graduation, I think that's where you get into that. Hold on. let me-
Yeah. So the 7th is the first Tuesday, but it's a full week into June.
which would give-
And that would be a week after no, 2 weeks after, because there's 5 Tuesdays in May, so this meeting would be scheduled on the 24th. And then it would be 2 weeks after that, this event would be held.
So is it
Does that-
basically 7 weeks from now?
Yes,
Yep.
yeah. Yep. Does that seem like a reasonable timeline? And I think if we start publicizing it through town public outreach sooner rather than later, so people can get it on their calendars. And, this is reminiscent of the parenting through COVID sort of webinar form. We could do it as a webinar format as opposed to an open Zoom meeting, and that gives a little more control over chat and Q&A and stuff too. So, but that's a harder thing to get a slot for with the town.
I'm interested
So-
to know Jericho's thoughts since he was thinking.
I think that is entirely, that works, to not be as verbose as I like to be.
Thanks for your brevity, Jericho. Appreciate it.
Do not get used to it.
Okay, I promise I won't. Veronica,
Question, and this is related, but not necessarily. We're doing Zoom meetings right now. Do we have the permission to continue doing Zoom, or will we be going hybrid or back to in person?
All I know about with regards to that is that regulatory bodies, regulatory boards will be hybrid. I do not believe any of the other boards has been determined one way or the other yet.
Okay.
so I don't know where it stands because it's a matter of the legislature setting
Right.
this requirement. And so that's a good question that we should follow up on in terms of, and and I'm assuming when Jericho or Ann goes to try to schedule this with Erica, we're going to get they'll get a response that by then, as it stands right now, this would be required to be an in-person or a hybrid. And yeah, Sue.
My understanding from the commission is that if the same rules apply, Zoom is allowable at least through July 15th.
Okay, that's great. So that's good to know. Okay. So we're good on that June timeline then. All right, great. Everybody feel good about where we are on this? Head nods, consensus? Okay, great. The next item on our agenda is an update from the Director of Human Services.
Right after I was being not verbose. I
Mhm.
will be
Have
extremely,
at it.
I will be extremely brief, as there's not a lot to report on COVID. To start with, we don't know how much there is. We do know that it's still around. There's a vaccine clinic on this Saturday. We'll be scheduling the next clinic for the month of May, based upon the numbers of that. So we should have it reserved and publicized by the first week of May. In the Human Services Department, there's this year's CRC budget will be approved. The grant money was assigned to a variety of different groups in the normal manner. The only big change being that there was more funding available as the hospital did not receive any. Other than that, we have the Cannabis Grant money, which was awarded as well. This was the second full year of that. Fun fact, it was about a 70% increase over the first year of the cannabis collection. If both dispensaries are running at full capacity and they have roughly the same sales as they did last year, we're looking at about $250,000 to $300,000 a year once Act Natural gets its stuff sorted out. Then what else do we have? The Behavioral Health Roadmap, which is the kind of output of the GPS-led survey of behavioral health resources. We're, I think, getting to a finalist state with a consultant to keep us in check with the state's roadmap. And then we should be breaking out into work groups and actual ongoing activities relatively shortly. So that's actually somewhat interesting. Brooke probably knows at least about as much about this as I do, but it looks like the food security project is going forward. There's another meeting for that coming up, and it looks like there already is, but there soon will be an additional amount of like actual working technology, which should help. And then what else is there? With the drawdown of our vaccine clinics, the two town nurses are going to have enough time to start doing clinics that are not vaccine clinics. So we have a technology clinic scheduled for the Salt Marsh, which would be like kind of a you can't get this to work, so bring it in and we'll try and figure out how to do it. Keziah Duarte, who's our current per diem community health nurse, is going to be leading a sexual education and kind of health kind of clinic aimed primarily at youth. So it's going to be kind of a variety of different sexual wellness related activities. And then Heather Francis, I believe, is going to be starting up some basic health screenings at the senior center to do just sort of like community health stuff. Should either of those catch on, I would like to be pivoting towards doing kind of general community health day or night semi-regularly. Heather's very excited to do all this sort of stuff. So we should have some ongoing stuff where we're actually doing community health in a proactive way as opposed to just reactive way. Other than that, that's basically it in terms of our current activities. There's a lot going on, but it's a lot less emergent than it was for the last year and a half. So it looks like we're actually making progress on stuff as opposed to just successfully treading water. If anybody has any questions about anything I just said or any unrelated COVID questions, anything like that, please ask. Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Brooke. Sorry.
Sue.
Thank you. I just wondered, Jericho, if substance use harm reduction was in your docket of community health initiatives.
It absolutely is. It's a subject extremely near and dear to our community health nurse's heart. It's pretty close to her. I think at the moment it's more complicated than a lot of the other stuff we're doing. So I think from my point of view, I want us to be a little more used to doing the actual regular peacetime work that we're doing, because this is a much more that's substance abuse, and anything substance abuse related is significantly more complicated than, diabetes screenings or that kind of thing. But yes, I could not stop Heather from doing work in that area if I tried, which I'm not going to. So
I'm really delighted to hear that. I know Heather is a big advocate, so that's great.
She is just literally chomping at the bit to do a lot of this stuff.
Any other questions for Jericho? Okay, so I'm going to move to new business and board comments. Anybody want to you can riff on any subject in this agenda item. Veronica.
This has been something I've been thinking of and trying to read up on. And when I think of public health, we have many different areas of that, and dental health is something that I don't really know what is provided here on the island. I know that we've got our dentist, we've got whatever, but if you don't have access to good dental hygiene and whatever, it could lead to health issues. And is that something that has ever been examined or looked at as a possibility of another service that could be provided?
So interestingly, Dr. Miner, who owns Accessible Dental, informed me that he is in the process of setting up a 501c3 to do free and reduced dental care in the community. So there you go. Initiative happening.
Good.
So I don't know where he stands. I know he's applied for his nonprofit status. I don't believe it had been granted. He's my landlord for another project, so we met through that. So anyway, there is an initiative, and maybe we could invite him. We had initiated a meet the program segment on these meetings, and I think that would be he should get on the list to come and talk to this group about that project. And I can ask him when I'm having a conversation with him about ants.
Okay.
So, Athlon?
Veronica, I just wanted to give you some feedback in thinking about that the public schools do have a free dental program.
Okay.
And announcements go out when they're coming. People have plenty of time. They send it out in different languages, primarily Spanish, but just for your information of what we do have, I wanted to share that with you.
Okay, good. Good to hear.
Tara?
Sorry, here we go. So an organization that I've been working with for a little bit is called Wheel It Forward. And I'm wondering so the organization basically makes it really easy for people to borrow or donate durable medical equipment, because we know how expensive it is, how often it's not used for very long. And this particular organization, it started less than a year ago and has expanded like crazy because they just got it out there. And I'm wondering if we have something similar, or if not, maybe we could get someone interested in starting such an organization. I'd be happy to do
Sue?
it.
I know that the Masons on Island do collect and deliver, and we use them this winter at my house, and they're amazing. I don't think they have everything under the sun, but I asked for crutches and a knee scooter, and they were like, oh, hey, by the way, you probably need this and like shower chairs. And so they have a collection. It's pretty informal, like you text message a guy named Buzzsaw, and he brings it to your house, and
Whatever works.
Yeah.
Then Nantucket Way. I also know that Elder Services also takes in used durable medical equipment, I think. I'm not sure what happens to it, but it's an interesting. So for me personally, people knowing where to access the resources they need is a challenge here. And so,
Right.
that idea is near and dear to my heart. And on that note, I want to give an update. Jericho mentioned the food security project, and that is the other reason that I will not be staying on the Council for Human Services is that I'm part of a group that has founded the Nantucket Resource Partnership, and our mission is to use a technological platform to facilitate the intake and referral across the community for access to human services. And we're starting with food security. Wow. And the model is in food security is that the human service providers that meet clients where they are will be able to refer them into the platform. And then a menu of food security programs will come up for the client, and they will be able to decide what programs they want that they're eligible for and want to be referred to. And then their provider on the intake side, on the referral side, will be able to monitor their status in those programs, because those programs will report back into the platform whether the person has what their status is, say at the food pantry or the Nourishing Nantucket food box program at Pip and Anchor and so forth. So we're building out the model and the technology in the area of food security with a plan to expand it to all human services eventually.
Wow.
So single point of entry.
Yeah.
And we're working with referral partners initially, because when you do direct self-referral, you get a whole it becomes a much more complex technological problem to solve. So having the intermediary referring agencies at this point, but the dream is eventually that any individual who needs help will be able to go into the platform, fill out a survey, and be referred out to the programs and agencies that they need. That's the big dream. We're in the middle of fundraising to staff up and make it real, but the platform exists and it's being utilized by the community school to refer students from the entire school district into food security programs and their families. And it's small scale at the moment, but we have big plans.
Wow.
And so that's a project that I'll be working on a lot in lieu of the work here. And the other thing that I wanted to say in this, Jericho's mentioning the Cannabis Grant. What we found in the application process this year is that the town puts out the RFP and it's a last minute scramble for these organizations to put together applications for programs. And I think that there's a role for the Council for Human Services to play in doing some research on what programs are needed and helping incubate or foster the conversations around who might take ownership of a new program and therefore put together an application for what will be 3 times the money that was available the first year, theoretically, so that it's not sort of this crazy clown car last minute scramble for what was going to be $100,000 turned out to be $170,000 like at the last minute. So and then one applicant had to withdraw because their financials weren't in line with the requirement with the RFP. So I think that there can be some work done on that whole CRC grant process, both for the regular CRC funding and cannabis. And Jericho and I have talked about this, and one of the things that I have suggested is that this group and the CRC participate in a strategic planning process of sorts ahead of that next grant funding cycle, so that it's a little more strategic and structured, and that it also fosters and encourages collaboration, interagency collaboration for owning and managing programs that benefit the community. So, Veronica.
Question, the cannabis money, is that separated into a separate fund used specifically for certain programming?
Addiction related, substance use, and programming.
Okay.
For reference, oops, sorry, go ahead, Sue.
Oh, I was going to say the select board added mental health component to that, but I think it's supposed to be geared towards substance use, and I would hope it would, co-occurring disorder diagnoses would be another top seller.
And it is the stated mission of this board, and I would encourage everybody to go back to the website and read it, is to guide policy on how that funding is allocated. And so it is this board's job to assess the needs of the community and make recommendations through to CRC and town administration and the select board on priorities in human services in the community. And so I think that there's a much, this conversation that we're going to have around the court docket is a small piece of that puzzle, but I think that there's a lot more opportunity for leadership and driving policy with information from the community. And that's my hope for this board moving forward. So, we are at 8:12. So Holly, you came on. Did you want to
comment?
Yes, time for public comment.
Okay, I'll be very brief. I came tonight because I've been a part of the homelessness team this winter. and it's just wrapping up at the end of this month. But what we've noticed when we've had guests is we'll engage them in conversation. And what often has come up is the lack of a public shower and or even bathroom year round. And there used to be apparently a public shower that was open year round, but it has no longer, it has been for the past couple of years anyway. They've noticed that there's been a lock on the door. We haven't been able to find out exactly who has ownership of this space. It's down by the wharf. I think there are two. There's a boat basin, bath, and another area at the Nantucket Pier. There's conflicting information when you go to the town website about what's open and what's not, because a lot of things are say TBD. So people wouldn't know that you can go, for example, into the steamship during the day, or the Stop and Shop for that matter, and actually use the restroom. And it seems like it is in the public health good and also a human service to provide at least one year-round public bathroom. And even the one that's at the information center, which doesn't have a shower, it has only cold water even in the winter. I've used it myself. And it's also kind of in a dilapidated state, I must say, for a downtown public restroom in a high-end resort. So we're hoping that maybe this is an issue that could be addressed. And I thought maybe bringing it to this council might be a good start to bring it to awareness.
Thanks, Holly. And just as a point of process, public comment is sort of a one-way opportunity, because it's not that this item is not on the agenda. But Holly, we can add it to an agenda for a more robust conversation and research, for sure. So thank you. Jericho's hands up.
Yeah, Holly, I just want to give you my email address so you can send me an email about this. This is something that's crossed my radar from the last time Heather was down there. So I would love to talk to you about this further, not during this meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
My email address, do you know it, or should I just give it to you real quick here?
Go ahead, give it to me real quick.
It's JMELE at nantucket-ma.gov.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Terrific.
Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
All right. So we have reached, thanks Holly so much for sitting through the whole meeting. Hopefully it was interesting, because I know.
Very interesting. I'm glad that this topic's being taken up.
But it might be helpful for us to move public comment to the beginning of the meeting rather than the end of the meeting, for someone who just wants to comment without having to listen to the whole meeting. It's just a thought as an agenda planning. So that said, we've reached the end of our agenda. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Second from Veronica by roll call. Tara,
Agreed.
Athlon. I think that was a yes. Ruthie,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
and Veronica.
Definitely.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you all. Depending on what happens, there may be a resignation. There will likely be a resignation at the next meeting from me. And I just want to express my gratitude for everybody's commitment to this work in the time that we've served together. And I look forward to working with this group in my other capacities, whatever they may be, in a couple of weeks. So
Thank you.
thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jericho and Ann.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Night.